My mom is 90 years old this year, and I don't get to see my mom often, as you know, so I don't see the gradual change or aging process. I don't get to witness day to day or, month to month. So but my mom is overall pretty healthy. She has her own weaknesses, but she is able to live alone still. My brother and sister help her a lot. Um, so when my mom was about mid 80s, probably 5, 6 years ago, I got to know that she passed out and she was hospitalized and stayed there about a month. I didn't know what caused her. I was thinking, I've heard that she had, the symptom first was nausea and vomiting and some confusion. She didn't make sense. So I wasn't sure if it's heart related or a stroke or. Then later I found out the cause of her illness was low sodium in her blood. I didn't know there's such a thing. I always thought that, high sodium was bad. I always, conscious about how much sodium intake I have in my nutrition. But I never knew that low sodium in your blood can cause that kind of serious illness. So I researched and, it's called hyponatremia, right? Anybody in medical? Hypo? Okay. Okay. Hey, hyponatremia, okay, was close. Hyponatremia. And then I realized that there is a term for the high sodium in your blood that's equally dangerous, and that is hyper, right? Everybody knows the Latin terms, hypernatremia. So I realized that lower sodium is as bad as high sodium, and high sodium is as bad as lower sodium. The reason why I tell you this is Jesus was facing that kind of environment. The people were given the laws from the very early stage of building their relationship with God. They were becoming a covenant people with God. And as a sign of this covenant, God gave the law out of love to have people with covenant access to God. So the law was given with the spiritual intent of love and strengthening and setting these people apart from the rest of the world. For example, let's take Sabbath. Sabbath, observe the Sabbath is the fourth commandment in the 10 Commandments. Everybody remember 10 Commandments? This is the fourth commandment. When God gave this commandment to the people, this commandment was given so that people can work hard 6 days, and then 7th day will be a time of rest, just as God rested after the creation. And then renewal, recharging, and dedicate that day to become holy. Keep the Sabbath and keep it holy. That's the commandment. And that day was given as a kind of reset day. It's like a reset button, reset button. It goes to default. And that default is we are the creation, the beloved children of God, and God is our creator. So every seventh day, we're supposed to be reset, redirect ourselves to God. All 6 days we work hard, get distracted, get busy, and work hard, and put a lot of load on our shoulders. Yet on the seventh day, our focus should be God. Our focus should be the purpose and will of God. And the rest of the 6 days, you begin a new week. But the problem was, the people of Israel forgot about this. They forgot about the purpose of Sabbath. They didn't keep it holy. They didn't keep the entire ethic of the work the way that God designed. So what happened? A lot of prophets were sent to make sure they abide by the laws, especially Sabbath. Ezekiel talks about it, Jeremiah talks about it, and it is from the message of God. God is speaking through those prophets to keep the Sabbath holy. But then they didn't listen either. And you know the story, right? They didn't have a desire to align their lives with God. And then the Assyrians came, Babylonians came, and their grounds of being was destroyed, and they were sent to exile as a result of that. So when they returned finally, rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, restarted this whole journey again, they intended to have really strong sense of keeping the law. So from lack of laws, like hyponatremia, they're going way out to hypernatremia by setting hundreds of rules and regulations, not from God, but from people. They're putting all those things, extras, and very oppressive, very hard to keep. They were overdoing. So Sabbath turned out to be not the day of rest, not the day of freedom or relax, so that their focus can be just God. It became a day that has so many rules, what is permissible and what is not permissible. So they have like hundreds of rules and regulations, and that alone was what Jesus was challenging. You think that you're keeping the Sabbath rules, but what Jesus was really doing was breaking those rules and regulations. How many times Jesus healed someone on Sabbath? So many times. He healed a blind man. He healed a person who was disabled for 38 years, and he told him to pick up your mat and walk. And he touched the lady who had infirmity for 18 years. She was healed right away. He healed a blind man. There were so many incidences that Jesus did the healing on Sabbath. And every single time, you go check it out, every single time he healed, someone. He offered healing and offered wholeness and health to this person. There was always challenge by the Pharisees. Why did you do it? You broke the law. You're not supposed to be doing that. And Jesus' answer was, Sabbath is for man, not man is for Sabbath. Jesus is saying that wouldn't you release your donkey from the stall and lead the donkey to go to get water? How come you're saying that healing someone who's been suffering for 18 years is wrong thing to do? Doing Sabbath, which is right thing to do? Doing good or doing evil? Giving life or killing? Jesus had a very strong sense of the law is given to people to give freedom, to access, to connect to God. So when Jesus came to say that you be the salt of the earth and you be the light of the earth, world, and I came to fulfill the laws and prophets. And that fulfill, the Greek word plerou, is something that says filling it, filling something to the full. In other words, fulfilling or perfecting. Jesus came to fulfill and perfect the law. But how can you fulfill and perfect the law that can be either hypernatremia or hypernatremia? What is the balance that will give to us the enough nutrition, just enough, not going either way? That is the law of love. People ask Jesus, what is the greatest law? What is the greatest commandment? Jesus said, love your God, love your Lord with all your hearts and minds and souls, and love your neighbor as yourself. What Jesus is doing is trying to bring the spiritual intent and the application of God's law in daily living by interpreting the laws with the law of love, with the light of love. James and Paul also said that the sole intent of the law, God's law, is love. So when law becomes oppressing, when it becomes an obstacle of bringing people to the love of God, that law, as Jesus did, is not the law with God's purpose. That is something we all need to remember. The laws are always need to be interpreted in the light of love of Christ, in the light of love that is given by God. Sometimes you wonder, how many laws are there in the Bible? Too many, right? Too many. Sometimes you wonder how these people all kept those laws. But the laws that God has given, very detailed, meticulous way of God given, was effective until Jesus came. When Jesus came, and he was the embodiment of God's love, that love is the law for us. That love is the guideline, purpose, and spiritual intent of the law. And we have only one law. That is the law of God. That's what we stand for as the followers of Jesus, as the congregation of the Church on the Cape, as larger part of Christian community. We stand for the law of God, which is love. So when you face challenges of God's laws and how to apply to your life, remember the Christ. Remember the love of Christ on the cross. And in the light of Christ, look at the law. And you will know what to do, because the Spirit of God in you will help you discern what is the right thing to do. When one challenged Jesus in John about healing on Sabbath, Jesus said, "Do not judge by the outer appearance, arrogantly, superficially, but judge fairly and righteously." And that is something we all need to remember in our hearts. Amen.